is mind-boggling enough, right? But according to the teachings, and not just Lord Buddha, but the great masters whom we respect for their other teachings on wisdom and so forth, like Nagarjuna says, it's not as though other people have just been your mother once. Say you take one person, Say I take one person in the room. Say I take Abhijitji here with the camera. If I say, okay, he's been my mother in a past life. There's no beginning seeable to consciousness, according to Lord Buddha. So then, yeah, definitely, Abhijitji has been my mother. Possible, yeah, quite possible. But people like Nagarjuna, this great saint, yeah, there, the picture there, great Madhyamaka scholar, very, Buddha, close enough to being a Buddha. He said, each person has been your mother numberless times. Isn't that something? That's very mind-stretching. So Abhijit has been my mother more than once, numberless times, because I've had numberless past lives. Numberless, countless. Of course, there are 7.3 or 4 billion humans on this planet, but we're just taking this planet. We're not even taking other solar systems. We keep on discovering. They've discovered this other solar system, 7 planets going around as some kind of sun. Whatever, according to Buddhism anyway, there's beings throughout space. So they've all been my mother countless times because there is no beginning to my mind. This is very mind-stretching. It's really asking us to... this is one area where we see our conditioning, where I see my conditioning, my prejudice. How am I to think about this when I can't even remember being born or my last life? Well, of course, not remembering one's birth is a good reasoning also for saying, look, if you can't even remember your birth, maybe there was a past life. Just because you can't remember it doesn't mean it wasn't there. You can't even remember being born, which did happen. So anyway, numberless. Can we even begin to get our minds around this? For this we'll have to, even if we believe in rebirth, even if we believe in continuity of consciousness, this is a very vast thought, isn't it? To think that everybody in the street, everybody I see, hear about, has been like that, has been a mother, has looked after me in some form or other. I don't know, I can't remember if the teachings say they've each been my mother numberless times as a human, but maybe they've certainly been my mother numberless times in different forms of life. So animal, preta, human, hell beings don't need a mother. Gods also, God realms, I don't think they need a mother, spontaneous birth, but, animals, humans, hungry ghost realm beings, they all need a mother, all need mothers. So, isn't this an extraordinary thought? Very difficult to get around this one, but we can begin by thinking, well, by investigating consciousness, the fact that consciousness isn't just the brain. And there are many reasonings here, so many reasonings we have to go in for. Of course, if we're a great meditator, then we can get an idea from our meditation. But if we're not yet a great meditator, we have to employ other reasonings as to why this body, this brain, is not all there is. That there is a subtle element of consciousness that we have very little idea of right now, which we don't access knowingly, and which the yogis access in meditation, but we don't, not yet. Not able to access that very subtle level of consciousness, which does go from life to life, from body to body, according to the teachings. So all sentient beings have been my mother. Is it possible to think about this? What do you think? What's your reaction when you hear this? Just feels like something too absurd, or too absurd or unusual to even contemplate right now? What do you think? Anybody have a preliminary or mature reaction to this? Some of you have heard this teaching for 20, 30 years. What do you think about this? I can't remember how I first thought when I heard it. But I know that still it's a very tricky one. It's very difficult. What do you think? Nobody wants to share?
I really believe that.
You really believe it?
Yes, because I have experienced it a couple of times in my life.
Because you what?
I've experienced it many times in my life.
Experience what exactly?
Like I met people who were very stranger to me, meeting them for the first time, and I had this very insightful emotions within me, telling me that this person was my mother in my previous life.
You got a feeling?
Yes.
About that?
Yes. Even once it was very difficult for me because I met a person in Vilnius, Lithuania, and I immediately, like the moment I saw her, she was wearing a Punjabi cap, which is very unusual thing for a Lithuanian to wear, and she was suffering with cancer, and I was like very disturbed.
But what then led you to think that she had been your mother?
The way, there were a lot of things that was like very much coherent. I was like able to cognize things, the kind of emotions and the way she was talking to me, treating me like her son. In this life, she was never married. Probably she died right now because I lost the track of her.
And then, how easy is it then for you to go take that further and say, well, others have also been my mother? Not just one person, but...
It is possible. It is possible.
Makes it more possible.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Anybody else had a similar experience? Linda?
Nothing similar. I remember when I first heard this one, I was just, oh, that's rubbish. How can that be so? It was just too vast. It was too much to think about. And then it also placed a little bit of this is from a Western perspective, a little bit of guilt. Well, if everyone's been my mother, I've not been very nice. So it was a very hard one to get my mind around for a long time. And now I keep going back to it. I revisit it and just logically thinking about the possibilities of rebirth and endless beginningless time. It is logically possible. So now I'm beginning to accept it and actually try and work on the emotional side of things. Because there is empathy just for another human being. That's easy enough. You can understand people's thoughts and feelings and they want to be happy. The next step would be, okay, they've been extra kind to me. And just admit that I am so vulnerable that I needed a mother to take care of me. And it's almost this admitting of vulnerability that hits the ego more and makes it even more harder to understand. Especially if you're coming from a scientific, logical kind of background.
Yeah.
So we're working on it.
Interestingly, my parents knew a lady who was a case of reincarnation, and she figured in that book also, Wise, Brian Wise. And when she was a young child, she kept telling her parents that I actually belong to this village and my husband and 3 children are there. And they took her back and it was true, and first they thought the child was mad, but then it turned out to be true. And of course her husband and children were much older than she was, and she died in a traumatic accident. And that's how she, sometimes when there's a traumatic death, your consciousness does not switch off from the previous life as most of ours does. So I knew about reincarnation before I came to Buddhism, because we knew this lady very well.
Good.
And Shanti Devi, her name was. So, and so then the second thing which led me, so that is why Buddhism became easy for me to accept, because I knew about reincarnation before I came to it. And the second thing then is, if reincarnation is possible, then karma theory matters very much, because what we do in each life carries on. And so how I'm using that, perhaps for selfish reasons, is that I offer mantras daily for all sentient beings, because I hope that will heal my karma.
Yeah.
with other people.
Good. Good. So there's many ways, isn't there, of approaching this. Stories, accounts, people remember their past lives, reflecting on the differences in young children in the same family, the same environment, how different they might be mentally in terms of their habits, reflecting on all these things. It also depends, I mean, one has to take this in context. As a Buddhist practitioner, one would have, before one gets to this stage of reflecting on bodhicitta like this, one would have done a lot of reflection on refuge, taking refuge. Now, taking refuge involves reflecting a lot on qualities of the Buddha, who a Buddha is, what the Dharma is, you know, and developing more conviction, more faith and conviction in the Buddha and the Dharma. So if one has that kind of stable conviction, then there's also part of the mind which does not automatically reject, but is much more open to the different teachings that are there. So one, because of one's trust in Lord Buddha, and really having trust that he's not lying to us, and also that he's not confused, but is seeing reality totally clearly. So then we have faith that, what he's saying here has to be taken seriously. It's not just some kind of, it's not an untruth, something to be really thought about seriously. So then that can also help if we have deep trust and faith in Lord Buddha and in our teachers, obviously. If you have strong devotion to your teacher, faith in your teacher, and your teacher keeps on mentioning these teachings, this point, then you develop more and more openness in the mind. Of course, it's not the same as having a direct realization, obviously. You know, seeing pictures about a far distant country is one thing. Say the tip of South America. You've heard about it, you've seen documentaries on it, but what would really do it would be to go there, to see it for oneself. Of course, that's a different level of experience. So wouldn't it be wonderful to have the clairvoyance to see directly our past lives, which is what can be attained through meditative concentration and so forth? That would be the best, but for now we can still, I think, have some deep conviction that it's possible, that it's definitely possible, that it is this way, short of direct knowledge. I mean, I'm convinced, 100% in one sense, that there is a place called Tierra del Fuego at the bottom of South America. I have conviction about this. One of my teachers went there, but I haven't been there yet. So, I mean, how you might say to me, how do you know? You haven't been there. You haven't traveled to that place. You haven't seen it with your eyes, nakedly, directly. So how do you know it's there? Well, there's all this other evidence, I could say, that it is there. So anyway, we just have to work with this as best we can. If it's too difficult, then we just have to leave it for the time being, not push ourselves so that we become antagonistic or hate the idea. You know, we shouldn't feel aversion to the teaching because it's too difficult right now. We can just leave it. But think, okay, it is possible that there have been past lives, and if there have been, beginningless, and then we can slowly work with that one. But it's obviously a critical one here. And it's easier for people who've been born in a certain culture where rebirth is accepted. That also helps, obviously. Okay? So this is the the first point, that all sentient beings have been your mother. Then, of course, the second vast point is to reflect on what it means that beings have been our mother. You know, recalling their kindness. So not only recalling, so mainly here, starting with the kindness of your mother, a present life mother, and then extending that to seeing how mothers do look after their children. And this is a vast practice. I was just looking at the commentary yesterday on the Lamrim text by one great Geshe, and even he's devoted several pages to it, and then still he says this is very short explanation because it's vast. He gives so many examples of how a child totally depends on its mother. How the mother, most mothers just spend so much time, energy, even, sacrifice themselves, even commit non-virtue for the sake of their offspring. Again and again and again. And when I look at how people take care of their mothers, often also, obviously, mothers who are not very well off or, in difficult circumstances, still putting so much care. And, it's not like a job which you do from 9 to 5. And, how many people do you find anyway who do their jobs well from 9 a.m. to 5 a.m., 5 p.m., who actually give, 7-8 hours of hard work. But a mother has to pretty much, with a very young child anyway, it's a 24-hour job. Looking after a child is, one has to be on the ball most of the time. You have to be ready to wake up at any time, to wash and feed at any time. It's just staggering. I often give the example when I was, visiting my brother when his son was 8 days old. When I visited them it was Jerusalem at that time, and I was just amazed at how much effort they had to put in. They had to get up twice a night at least, to feed, clean the child, and there were no complaints. There was no complaint that this is just what you do. If you're a parent, then you look after the child. Again and again and again, all the time. With a very young child, if you don't do that, then there's a danger that they will harm themselves, and of course that they will go thirsty or hungry or whatever. So it's like a 24-hour job, and it's incredible, and it goes on and on. And a mother may also have other work to do, obviously. So it's pretty incredible to think about what a parent, what a mother especially, does for a child. We could have all sorts of complaints. We could say, of course, my mother wasn't such a good mother. She didn't always feed me when I wanted, blah, 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 whatever. But the point here is we should remember what we're trying to do. With this meditation, we're trying to generate great compassion, responsibility. If we wanted to, of course, we could pick on all the mistakes that all the beings are making all the time and generate, great hatred instead of great compassion. In fact, that's what some people do. We generate aversion towards sentient beings by thinking of their mistakes all the time. But here the point is the opposite, to look at what others have done for us, and it's staggering. It's staggering. Yeah. So we can make our positive thoughts of love powerful by considering how a mother takes care of her child, how she worries about her child, how she wants her child to develop, how much more she loves the child than herself. A child's primary thought is of the mother when frightened. When frightened, the child seeks the mother first. She's naturally the child's first friend. And this is not only true of human mothers, even animal mothers behave the same way. They're far less competent and intelligent than humans, but still they love and protect their children. Lama gives an example of just some birds on his porch, how much effort they put into building a nest very beautifully, and then, hatching the eggs, caring for the young, how even some birds protected their nest, their children, their chicks from the Geshe, the Lama, when he was young, trying to, come towards the nest and harm the birds or, steal the eggs, how these birds were even attacking these young boys, not afraid. So, when you look at sentient beings, how they care for their children, it's amazing. One story given a lot in the Tibetan tradition is this one, that the story about a highwayman who used to rob horse caravans coming from the eastern part of Tibet to the capital, Lhasa. So one time during an attack, a pregnant mare was slashed with a big knife. And as the horse fell to the ground, her wound caused her to give birth. And soon the mother and her foal were lying in the dirt next to one another. So even though the mare was dying, she was using her last bit of strength to lick the colt and try to help it, try to help her baby. So this vivid example of motherly love touched the thief so deeply that he vowed that he'd never rob and kill again. So this is possible, just a natural concern, natural care, that a mother has for the child. And we all know that it doesn't just extend to when you are a helpless infant. Those of you who still have your mothers alive, you probably will notice how they are still rather concerned about you. Even if they're quite old and doddery, they might still be quite concerned. And this, of course, can be a cause of great, annoyance to us, that stop mothering me, stop taking, I can look after myself now. But it's also quite touching how concerned a mother and father also, but mainly mother, is concerned for the children. Again and again and again. At university, there was one chemistry student in the first year, when we were getting to know each other at university. He proudly opened his big suitcase, and it was a 10-week term, I think. It was a short term, 10 weeks. But anyway, he opened his big suitcase and showed a whole array of clothes, underwear, shirts, all this. He said proudly, "My mother has given me so many clothes for this term that I don't need to wash anything myself. I have enough to last me the whole term." And true enough, his mother had, gotten ready all of these clothes for her 18, 19-year-old son, so that he wouldn't have to bother to wash his clothes. Of course, you may say that's over-mothering. One might well say that. But just look how much a person is concerned for another person, spending their time and energy on another person, even though that person is quite able to look after themselves. So you could say it's an example of ignorance as well, yes. But look at the concern, look at the effort, look at the time that another sentient being has spent on us in this lifetime, And it's very easy to forget, I think, sometimes, because one remembers sometimes only the rather negative things or the difficult things with one's parents. But when you look at how we are alive because of them, then one could begin to change one's attitude drastically. Which I think is very necessary, because, maybe not so much now and not so much in India, but in the West for a while there was a big trend in blaming the parents for just about everything. If you have a problem, you go back to your childhood and you blame the parents. So there's a lot of negative literature coming out by very well-funded and reputable institutes about how damaging families are and how terrible parents are. I mean, it could lead to that kind of understanding, which is very negative. When we see how much they have done for us. The Lama makes a point here, which we always need to remember, which is that these analytical meditations are difficult in the beginning. This happened in the very first course that I ever attended. Back, very, very embarrassing to say this, 40 years ago. This Easter, it'll be 40 years ago. So then this other member of the course, who later became a teacher himself, said, "Oh, this is difficult, this meditation." He said that to the Lama. "Oh, this is very difficult." And the Lama just gave a very straightforward answer. This Geshe, he just said, "Well, yeah, of course, you just have to do it again and again and again. It takes time." And somehow, I don't know if it's just a Western mentality or what, but somehow there's a wish for things to happen quickly. We expect something to happen quickly. We don't have much patience. I think that's maybe gotten worse now, actually, in our modern culture. We want things to happen in a hurry. So if I am meditating on this, why aren't I getting a result quickly? So the Lama says it's difficult in the beginning, but these meditations become easier and stronger as we proceed. Realizations can't be achieved in one day. Success takes more than a little work, using more than a single reason, in more than just a few meditation sessions. It may take a long time to develop complete certainty in the object of meditation, but we should meditate until we succeed. Yogis practice this way. So if you just read this book and don't do any analytical meditation on your own, your mind may become tough. That means in the future, if you read or hear about this topic, you may think, I know this already. I don't need this. So then the teachings can't help someone whose mind is as hard as iron. This method can transform your mind 100%. There's no other method than this to develop the mind. So he's saying then we should examine these reasonings and follow them more and more. The more we deliberate on these points, the stronger our understanding and attitude of affection will be. Eventually, these words will be like the horse that carries the mind along the path of spiritual development. And we will eventually be able to actualize affectionate love from the depths of our hearts. And if we do this, our positive attitude will become irreversible. Ignorance and other wrong views will be powerless to overcome it. So again, he's just saying, we have to devote time to practice it. That's why people spend months and years working on these things. Several times in the book, the Lama said that even if it takes most of your life or a whole lifetime to strongly develop some of these points, to actualize some of these points, it's so worthwhile, for one's future development, rather than just toy around with different things and, gain a lot of different intellectual knowledge, but not go deeply into any of these basic practices. This is mentioned several times because I think lamas like this, they see so many students who are not actually going deeply into any topic properly, and so not developing any realizations. Even our own teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, said this. He said, now we've been studying so long in our organization. This organization has been around since, 1969. How many people, he's asked, actually have strong realizations of the basic points of the path, stable, strong realizations, which mean they really have changed our mind, our life, transformed the way we look at the world and how we behave. How many people have these kind of realizations? And he's asking because he realizes that it's very, very few. So if one checks up, it could be quite sobering. We have a lot of knowledge, intellectual knowledge, some people, but actual experience, that's another matter. Does this make sense? I mean, it makes sense intellectually, but then we ask, where am I going to find time to practice? Well, it seems like we find time to do things that we really want to do. That's the point. I mean, I found 4 hours out of my life yesterday evening to go to a long movie. I can't remember the last time I did straight through 4 hours meditation. Very embarrassing. Of course, then my excuse is it was a long movie. But I knew it was going to be a long movie.
What movie?
Huh?
Do you remember the name?
Do I remember the name?
Of the movie.
Yeah, my memory is that good, yeah. It was only yesterday. It's called Silence by Scorsese. Anyway, I won't go into that because that's a distraction. But the point is, we find time for what we really want to do. And I was seduced into going to it by someone I won't mention. Not seduced in the wrong, I was encouraged by someone in the front row. He's also a movie buff.
Encouraged a lot of people.
Huh? In cahoots, yeah.
No, he has encouraged more than one person.
More than one person?
Oh, yes.
Okay. I see, he's a troublemaker. It's distracting us from our Lamrim meditation. So we just have to spend time on this. And this is, again, it's a source of embarrassment when one sees how much time one spends on samsaric activities, eating, drinking, and sleeping, and so forth, and then how much time on reflecting on how all sentient beings have been my mother and remembering their kindness. So if we remember their kindness well, then we have to develop the wish to repay their kindness. One thing to mention here, which I hadn't realized properly until, actually I hadn't thought about it much until I read it yesterday, to be honest, in this book. The Lama is saying, of course, that there are different kinds of love, okay? The love we are aiming to generate, the Mahayana love, is that one that comes in the third line of the immeasurable loving kindness verse. Remember, the first line is, how wonderful if all beings had happiness in its course. Second line, may they have happiness in its course. Third line, I myself will enable them to have happiness in its course. Okay? Generating sense of responsibility. Then, of course, realizing that one needs help. So the fourth line is, please, Gurus, Buddhas, bestow inspiring strength to enable me.